My name is Simone Elaine Caldwell. I'm 38 years old. I'm a forensic accountant based in Atlanta, Georgia. And for over a decade, I've made my living catching liars. I find the hidden accounts, the forged signatures, the money that moved when nobody was supposed to be looking. Companies hire me to find the fraud before the fraud finds them. I was good at my job. I was very, very good. But on a Tuesday evening in late November, standing inside a bank vault room on Peachtree Street with a small copper key in my shaking hand and a metal box sitting open on the table in front of me, I understood something that changed everything. The biggest fraud of my life had been happening inside my own home, and I had missed every single sign. I'm still shaking as I tell you this story, but I need you to hear all of it. If you're new here, drop your location and your local time in the comments right now. I love knowing who's up listening with me. And if this story moves you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Trust me, you are going to want to hear every second of what comes next. But let me take you back to the night I found that key. Let me paint you a picture of my life before everything fell apart. I grew up in Southwest Atlanta, the kind of neighborhood where everybody knew your name, knew your mama's name, and knew exactly what time you were supposed to be home. My father, Raymond Caldwell, was a civil engineer who built bridges for 30 years. My mother, Diane, taught third grade at Bunch Elementary until her knees gave out. They were not wealthy people, but they were solid. They believed in owning things, your home, your name, your word. Those were the values I inherited from them. Those were the values I tried to build my life on. I went to Spelman for undergrad, got my master's in accounting from Georgia State, passed my CPA exam on the first try, and spent the next several years building a reputation in forensic accounting that I was genuinely proud of. By the time I was 35, I had my own consulting practice, Caldwell Forensic Group, operating out of a small but clean office suite off Cascade Road. 3 employees, serious clients. The kind of work where people called you when things had already gone very wrong and they needed someone to untangle the mess before it became a federal case. I was good at reading people through their paperwork. Bank statements told me more about a person's character than most conversations ever could. I could look at a spreadsheet and feel something was off the way some people feel a change in weather before the clouds even show up. That was my gift. That was what I did. And somehow, I could not see what was happening in my own house. That is the part that still keeps me up at night. I met Derek Montel Caldwell, no relation, just an unfortunate coincidence that his friends teased him about endlessly at a real estate networking event in Buckhead, 11 years before any of this happened. He was 40 at the time, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately started working it. He sold commercial real estate. He was charming in a way that felt effortless, not performed. He laughed easily. He remembered details, what you ordered at dinner, what your sister's name was, what you had mentioned offhand 3 weeks ago. People liked Derek. Everybody liked Derek. I was not looking for anything serious that night. I was there for the contacts, not the conversation. But Derek Caldwell found me at the cheese table, made a joke about the wine selection that was actually funny. And by the end of the evening, we had talked for 2 hours without me noticing where the time went. We dated for 2 years before we got married. Those 2 years were genuinely good. I want to be honest about that. He was attentive. He showed up. He came to my work events and did not make me feel like he was doing me a favor by being there. He got along with my father, which mattered more to me than I ever said out loud. Daddy would sit with Derek on the back porch on Sunday afternoons and talk about the Falcons and property taxes and the way Atlanta had changed since they were young. Watching the two of them together made something settle inside me. We got married on a Saturday in June in a garden ceremony outside Savannah that my mother and Aunt Gloria planned down to the last ribbon. 120 guests. Dinner under string lights. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings. Our life together on Cascade Road had a rhythm I loved. I was up by 5:30 every morning, coffee made reviewing case files before the city woke up. Derek left later. Real estate ran on its own schedule and was usually home by 7 in the evening. We cooked together on Thursdays. We drove to Piedmont Park on Saturday mornings when the weather was good. We had a standing Sunday brunch tradition with our closest friends rotating houses. Those mornings were loud and full of laughter and the kind of easy comfort that makes you feel like you have built something real. My best friend Renee Washington was always at those brunches. Renee and I had been close since our sophomore year at Spelman, 20 years of friendship. The kind where you have each other's garage codes and know each other's coffee orders and can finish each other's sentences. She was a marketing director at a firm downtown Sharp and Funny. The kind of friend who would drive 45 minutes at midnight if you needed her. Or so I believed. My Aunt Gloria was a different story. Gloria had never fully warmed to Derek, and she did not pretend otherwise. She was my father's older sister, 71 years old, sharp as a tack, and completely unbothered by what anyone thought of her opinions. Every few months, she would say something just quietly pointed enough to make me uncomfortable.
That man always looks like he's calculating something.
She told me once, stirring her iced tea at a family cookout watching Derek across the yard. Gloria, I said, he's in real estate. That's literally what he does.
Mm-hmm,
she said, and left it there. I did not listen. I loved my husband and I trusted my best friend. I was busy building a career and a life, and I did not have room for vague feelings I could not document. But looking back now, the signs were there. I just kept filing them in the wrong folder. The phone thing started sometime in the spring, about 8 months before that November evening. Derek had always been comfortable leaving his phone on the counter, face up unlocked. Then one day, I walked into the kitchen while he was on a call, and he turned the phone face down before I even reached the coffee maker. I noticed. I tucked it away. A few weeks later, I came home early from a client meeting that had been canceled. Derek was in his home office. The door was mostly closed. I heard him on the phone, not arguing, not whispering, just talking in that low, even voice he used when he was being deliberate. I caught 3 words before he heard me in the hallway and the conversation ended. 3 words, the transfer documents. When I asked him later, casually not accusatory, what he had been working on, he said a commercial lease negotiation. He said it easily. He said it the way a man says something that is not worth questioning. I did not question it. Then one afternoon, about a month after that, I was looking for a pen in his home office desk, and I pulled open the wrong drawer. There was a folder sitting inside, thick with papers. My name was printed on the tab. Just my name, Simone E. Caldwell, in a font that looked official. I did not have time to open it. Derek walked in behind me, saw me at the desk, and the shift in his energy was so small and so fast that I almost missed it. He walked over, slid the drawer shut with 2 fingers, and handed me a pen from the cup on the desktop.
Looking for something?
He asked. Just a pen, I said.
There you go,
he said, and smiled. I told myself the folder was probably related to a property I co-owned with him, a small investment rental we had purchased together 3 years earlier. Perfectly reasonable explanation, nothing to worry about. I was a forensic accountant. I had spent 12 years teaching myself to follow the feeling that something was off, and I was standing in my own home talking myself out of it. That Tuesday in late November, I reached into Derek's jacket, the charcoal blazer hanging by the front door, the one I was taking to the dry cleaner the next morning to check the pockets before I dropped it off. My hand touched fabric, then paper, then something small and cold and metal. I pulled it out. A key. Small. Copper-colored. No brand marking, no label. The kind of key that does not open a door. And folded around it a strip of paper no bigger than a receipt with 4 words written in Derek's handwriting. Our little secret. I stood in the front hallway for a long time. The jacket was still in my left hand. The key was in my right. The house was quiet. Derek was upstairs in the shower. I could hear the water running, and the only sound in that hallway was my own breathing, which had gone very shallow, very fast. I am a woman who processes information for a living. When I receive something that does not fit the existing data set, my first instinct is not to panic. It is to categorize. To ask what is the most logical explanation for what I am looking at. I stood there and I tried to do that. A key with a note that said, "Our little secret." The most obvious explanation, the one that would occur to most people immediately, was the one I actually refused to land on first. Not because I was naive, because I was trained to consider all possibilities before committing to a conclusion. A key this size, this shape, small, no manufacturer marked smooth head was not a house key, not a car key, not a padlock. I had seen keys like this before in my professional life, in documents, in evidence logs. It was a safe deposit box key. That realization did not make me feel better. It made me feel worse in a different direction entirely. I folded the paper back around the key, put both of them in the inside pocket of my own cardigan, hung Derek's jacket back on the hook, and walked into the kitchen to finish making dinner. By the time he came downstairs, I had pasta on the stove and jazz playing low on the speaker and absolutely nothing on my face that would tell him anything. That was a skill I had not known I possessed until that night. The ability to be completely still on the outside while everything inside was moving fast. We ate dinner. We talked about his day at commercial property showing in Midtown that had gone well. We talked about a case I was wrapping up a mid-size logistics company whose CFO had been skimming for 4 years.
People are something else,
He said.
How do they think they won't get caught?
I looked at him across the table. I don't know, I said. Some people just think they're smarter than everyone else. He nodded and reached for more bread. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark next to my husband, and I ran through everything I could remember from the past year, looking for threads I had not followed. And I found them. The phone face down on the counter that had started in April. The low conversation about transfer documents May. The folder in the desk drawer with my name on the tab July. And something else I had not connected until that night 3 weeks after my father passed away in September. Derek had started asking questions about the estate. Not grief questions. Process questions.
Has the attorney finished the paperwork? Is the property deed being transferred to your name officially? Do you need to sign anything soon?
I had thought he was being helpful, trying to manage the logistics so I did not have to when I was still raw from losing Daddy. Now I was not so sure. My father had owned a house in Collier Heights, a solid brick home on a quiet street that he had paid off completely by the time he was 60. When he passed, he left it to me. Not to me and Derek jointly. To me. Daddy had been particular about that. He had sat me down 6 months before he died when we all knew the cancer was not going to lose, and he had said very carefully, "That house has your name on it and only your name. You make sure it stays that way. You hear me?" I had told him I understood. I had not asked him why he felt the need to say it. I understood now. I called Renee the next morning from my car before I went into the office. I needed to say it out loud to someone. I told her about the key. I told her about the note. I told her about the things I had been piecing together in the dark. There was a pause on her end that lasted maybe 2 seconds longer than it should have.
Simone,
She said,
girl, you find frauds for a living? You are literally trained to see patterns that aren't there. But don't do this to yourself.
"The patterns are there, Renee."
Or you're exhausted and grieving and you're projecting your work onto your marriage.
She softened her voice.
Derek loves you. I have watched that man love you for 10 years. A little key does not mean what you think it means.
I wanted to believe her. I almost did. What I did not know, what I could not have known sitting in that car outside my office building, was that Renee already knew exactly what the key meant. She had known for months. But I am getting ahead of myself. I want to tell you about my father's funeral first, because that is where the story really starts to fracture, and I did not see it at the time. Daddy passed on a Wednesday morning in late September, 2 months before I found that key. Peacefully at home the way he had wanted. I was with him. I held his hand. I told him everything I needed to say, and I believe he heard me. Derek was not there. He had been at a property closing in Charlotte. He had left the morning before knowing Daddy was declining, and I had asked him, not demanded, asked if he could push the closing by a day. He said he could not. He said this particular client had been difficult for months, and if he moved the date again, the deal would fall apart entirely. I told him I understood. He was not back until the evening of the funeral day itself. He walked in while family was still at the house, still in his travel clothes, hugged me briefly, shook hands with people he barely knew, and spent most of the evening on his phone in the back hallway. I told myself grief looks different for everyone. I told myself he had his own way of processing things. I told myself a lot of things that year. What I know now is that while I was sitting at my father's bedside saying goodbye, Derek was already in contact with a real estate attorney about the Collier Heights property, the property my father had just died to leave to me. I found the email timestamps later. The first inquiry was sent 2 days before Daddy passed. He had not even waited. But on that Tuesday night in November, I did not know any of that yet. All I had was a key, a note, and a feeling I could not shake. I did what any forensic accountant would do. I started digging. And the first thing I found stopped me cold. The first thing I did was identify the key. I know that sounds simple, but I am methodical by nature and by training, and when I am working a case, even when the case is my own life falling apart, I do not skip steps. I photographed the key from 3 angles on my desk at the office. I measured it. I looked up the manufacturer's mark on the bow, the small loop at the top, and cross-referenced it against the database I use professionally for document authentication cases. Safe deposit box key. Standard issue. Used by approximately 40% of major banking institutions in the Southeast. Distinguishing feature, the number stamped on the side. Box number 417. That told me what it opened. It did not yet tell me where. I pulled up 12 months of our joint bank statements that evening. Not unusual for me to have these. I managed most of our household finances. I went through every line item the way I go through a client's books. Methodically. Category by category. And there, in the miscellaneous fees section of March, was a charge I had processed 100 times without stopping. Annual safe deposit box rental. First National Bank. Peachtree Street branch. $48. I had categorized it automatically when it posted. I had assumed it was the small box we kept our passports and property insurance documents in, the one at our regular branch on Campbellton Road. I had never once questioned it because it looked exactly like what it was supposed to look like. A small, boring, unremarkable line item. That is how the best fraud works. It does not hide. It blends in. The Peachtree Street branch was not our regular bank. It was 4 miles north of where we lived in a part of Midtown I had no regular reason to visit. And the box number on the key 417 did not match the number on the paperwork for our Campbellton Road box, which I pulled up and checked within 30 seconds. Different bank. Different box. Same annual fee tucked quietly into the joint account for at least 1 full year that I could see. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my coffee going cold, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not panic. Not yet. Something quieter and colder than panic. The specific feeling I get when the numbers stop lying and start telling the truth. I needed to get into that box. But first, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. So I did something I had not done in years. I pulled the public property records for the Collier Heights house. My father's house. My house. The deed transfer was listed as pending. I read that twice, then a third time. Pending transfer. Filed 6 weeks ago. Transferring ownership from the estate of Raymond Arthur Caldwell to, and this is where my hand stopped moving on the trackpad, to Cascade Holdings, LLC. I did not recognize that name. I ran it through the Georgia Secretary of State's business registry. Cascade Holdings, LLC had been registered 11 months ago. Registered agent, a law firm downtown I had never heard of. Member listed Derek M. Caldwell. My husband had created a shell company, and someone had filed paperwork to transfer my father's house into it. Someone had used my name to do it, because a transfer out of an estate requires the signature of the heir, which was me, and I had not signed anything. I closed my laptop very carefully, the way you close a door when you do not want anyone to hear you leaving. The next morning, I went to the Fulton County Deed Recording Office on Pryor Street before it opened. I was the second person in line. When the clerk pulled up the transfer documents on request, I looked at the signature on the authorization form. It was my name. My full legal name, Simone Elaine Caldwell, in a signature that looked enough like mine to pass a casual review. The loops were right. The slant was right. The way the S connected to the I was almost perfect. Almost. I have spent 12 years analyzing signatures. I know mine the way I know my own face. The pressure distribution was wrong. The pen lifted in the wrong place on the second L in Caldwell. And the date written beside the signature, the date on which I had supposedly signed this document, was a Thursday in October. I pulled up my calendar on my phone right there at the counter. That Thursday in October, I had been in Birmingham, Alabama, presenting findings to a client's board of directors. I had receipts, a hotel record, and approximately 12 witnesses. I had not signed that document. Someone had forged my signature, and they had done it well enough that it had already progressed through the preliminary recording process without being flagged. I thanked the clerk. I walked out onto Pryor Street into the thin December morning air. I stood on the sidewalk and I breathed. Then I went home. Derek was in the kitchen making eggs still in his weekend clothes. He looked up when I came in and smiled that easy smile.
Hey, where'd you go this early?
Just running an errand, I said. I put my bag down. I poured myself coffee. I leaned against the counter and I looked at him. Hey, did you ever open a safe deposit box at that First National branch on Peachtree? I saw a charge on the account and I couldn't remember what it was for. The eggs kept sizzling. He did not stop moving, but something very small happened in his eyes. A fraction of a second of recalibration. If I had not been watching for it, I would have missed it entirely.
What are you talking about? I don't have anything like that.
The charge posts every March, I said, keeping my voice light. $48. I just want to make sure I'm categorizing it right. He turned to look at me then, and he smiled. Patient. Slightly amused. The smile of a man who has decided the best move is to make me feel foolish for asking.
Simone.
He set the spatula down and leaned against the opposite counter, arms crossed loosely.
You work with numbers all day and you still can't see what's right in front of you. That's almost funny.
He shook his head gently.
That charge is for the box on Campbellton. You know that. You set it up.
The box numbers are different, I said.
Bank probably reissued the numbers when they updated their system. I got a letter about it.
He picked the spatula back up.
You want eggs?
It was seamless. It was so seamless that for approximately 4 seconds, I actually wondered if I had made an error. That is how good he was. That is how long I had been living inside his version of reality without knowing it. But I had the deed transfer documents on my phone. I had my Birmingham hotel receipt. I had the key in my cardigan pocket. Sure, I said, eggs would be great. I sat down at the table and watched him cook, and I smiled and I said nothing. And that night, after he was asleep, I lay in the dark and I thought about the safe deposit box key. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about my father saying, "You make sure it stays that way." And I thought about one more thing. The box required 2 keys to open. I had one. Who had the other? I gave myself 1 week. 1 week to move carefully, gather what I could, and figure out exactly how deep this went before I made a single move that could tip him off. That was the professional in me talking. The woman in me wanted to walk upstairs, wake him up, and demand answers at 2 a.m. But I had seen too many cases fall apart because someone acted on emotion before they had enough documentation. I was not going to let that happen here. I started with the shell company, Cascade Holdings, LLC. Registered 11 months ago. I pulled every public filing associated with it, articles of organization registered agent records, any property transactions linked to the entity. There was one attorney handling the filing, a solo practitioner named Gerald Sims with an office in Dunwoody. I did not call him. I did not want anyone alerting Derek that someone was asking questions. But I noted the name and I kept moving. The forged transfer document was the centerpiece. I had photographs of it from the deed recording office. I sat with those photographs for a long time studying the signature. The longer I looked at it, the more certain I became. The forgery was good. Genuinely good. Practiced. This was not someone who had copied my signature once in a hurry. This was someone who had studied it. Someone who had access to enough examples of my real signature to replicate the muscle memory of it. That narrowed the field considerably. My signature appeared on legal documents, client contracts, bank forms. Derek had access to all of those through our shared home filing system, a set of accordion folders in the office closet that we had organized together years ago. But replicating a signature at that level of accuracy required more than occasional access. It required time and repetition. And then I remembered something that turned my stomach. 2 years ago, Renee had asked me to sign a birthday card for a group gift, one of those oversized cards that gets passed around at a party. She had laughed, and said she wanted everyone's real signature, not a scribble. I had signed it with my full legal signature, the one I used on documents, because she had specifically asked. She had taken a photo of the card afterward. She said it was for the memory. I had thought nothing of it. I thought about it now. I pulled up the safe deposit box charge again and looked at when it first appeared, 14 months ago, which meant the box had been opened 14 months ago, which meant this plan had been in motion for over a year, carefully, quietly, running parallel to our Sunday brunches and our Thursday cooking nights and every conversation we had ever had about the future. 14 months. I sat with that number for a long time. On Wednesday of that week, I drove to the Fulton County Property Records Office again this time to check whether any other properties had been touched. Our joint investment rental on Fairburn Road, a 2-bedroom we had purchased together in 2019, was clean. That deed was untouched. Whatever Derek was doing, he had focused specifically on the Collier Heights house, my father's house. The one asset that was mine alone, free and clear, with no joint ownership to complicate a claim. He had been strategic. That made it worse somehow. Opportunistic fraud I could almost understand in the abstract. This was calculated. This was patient. This was a man who had looked at his grieving wife and seen a window. That Thursday evening, Derek came home later than usual. He seemed distracted at dinner, checking his phone twice at the table, which he rarely did. When I asked if everything was okay, he said the Midtown deal was hitting a snag. I nodded and passed him the salt and watched his hands. Then he looked up at me with an expression I can only describe as evaluating.
Hey,
He said.
have you dealt with the estate attorney recently about the Collier Heights property?
My chest went absolutely still. Not this week, I said. Why,
I just want to make sure everything's moving along.
he said.
That property is sitting there generating nothing. You should be doing something with it.
I'm still thinking about what I want to do with it, I said. Something moved across his face. Fast. Gone before I could name it.
Right.
He said.
Of course.
He picked up his fork again.
Just don't wait too long. These things have carrying costs.
I smiled at him. I know, I said. I'm a financial professional, remember?
Right. Sorry. Forgot who I was talking to.
He laughed, but his eyes did not laugh. The next morning, I called in a favor from Marcus Webb, a colleague I had worked alongside on 3 federal cases over the past 5 years, a forensic document examiner who specialized in signature authentication. I met him for coffee at a place on Memorial Drive, and I slid the photographs of the forged document across the table without saying anything. He studied them for 4 minutes without speaking. Then he looked up. "This is a forgery," he said. "I know," I said. "It's a good one," he said. "Whoever did this had substantial reference material." He tapped the photograph. "See the baseline consistency here. That's not someone who practiced twice. That's someone who practiced until it felt natural." "How long would that take?" I asked. "To get it to this level?" He considered. "Weeks, maybe longer depending on the complexity of the original signature." I thanked him. I paid for the coffee. I drove to my office and sat at my desk and stared at the wall for a few minutes. Then something happened that I had not anticipated. Renee called. I had not spoken to her since our car conversation the week before, when she had told me I was projecting. When I answered, her voice was different, slightly too careful. The way someone sounds when they have been thinking about what to say.
Hey,
She said.
I just wanted to check on you. You seemed stressed last week.
"I'm okay," I said.
You sure? Because I was thinking, if something is going on with you and Derek, I'm here. You know that.
I looked at the photographs of the forged signature on my desk. "I know," I said. "Thank you, Renee."
I mean it, she said. I'm always on your side.
After we hung up, I sat very still. 20 years of friendship. Her voice in my ear saying, "I'm always on your side." And somewhere in a bank vault on Peachtree Street, a metal box that held the truth about exactly whose side she was on. That Saturday, Renee came to brunch at our house. She hugged me at the door the way she always did. She sat at my kitchen table and drank my coffee and laughed at Derek's jokes. At one point, she reached over and squeezed my hand when Derek stepped out of the room.
You doing okay? She said quietly.
"Getting there," I said. She nodded, warm and concerned. I looked at her face, this face I had known for 20 years. and I felt something go cold inside me that has never fully warmed back up. I still did not have proof that she was involved. Not yet, but the worst was yet to come. The Monday after that brunch, I went to First National Bank on Peachtree Street at 9 in the morning. I had spent the weekend preparing. Not emotionally, I had learned by then to set emotion aside until the work was done. Practically, I needed to establish that my name was on the account associated with Box 417 before I could request access. If Derek had opened the box under his name, only I would hit a wall. But if he had listed me as a co-holder, which would make the arrangement look legitimate, like something a married couple might share, then I had a legal right to walk into that vault room. I called the branch on Friday afternoon. I identified myself as a potential customer asking general questions about safe deposit box procedures. I confirmed that co-holders on an account could access the box independently with their own key. Then I asked, still casually, whether co-holder names were searchable by the account holder. The representative said yes with proper identification. I walked into that bank on Monday morning with my driver's license, my social security card, and the key. The branch manager was a woman named Deborah, somewhere in her 50s, reading glasses on a beaded chain. The efficient warmth of someone who has handled delicate situations before. I told her I needed to verify whether I was listed as a co-holder on a safe deposit account. I gave her the box number. She typed for a moment. Then she looked up. Yes, ma'am, Simone E. Caldwell, you're listed as co-holder. He had put my name on it. Of course he had. It made the arrangement look like a shared marital asset. It also meant that if anything was ever questioned, my name was attached to whatever was inside. Deborah walked me to the vault room herself. It was small and fluorescent lit. A row of metal boxes along one wall. A narrow table in the center. She used the bank's master key in conjunction with mine the way the procedure requires. The box slid open. She left me alone. I stood in that room for a moment before I looked inside. I remember the hum of the ventilation system, the smell of metal and recycled air, the particular silence of a room that exists specifically to hold things people do not want found. Then I looked. The box was not large, maybe 12 inches wide, 8 inches deep. But it was full. A manila folder thick with papers, a smaller envelope sealed, and a personal check already signed by Derek. Made out to, and I had to read it twice because my brain refused to process it on the first pass, Renee D. Washington, for $22,000. I picked up the check first. Derek's signature, Renee's full legal name. A memo line that read, Consulting Services Rendered. Consulting Services. I set the check down and opened the manila folder. Inside was a complete set of fraudulent transfer documents. Not copies. Originals. The deed transfer authorization with my forged signature. A notarization stamp fake. I could see it immediately. The registration number format was wrong. From a notary whose name I did not recognize. A cover letter from Gerald Sims, the Dunwoody attorney, addressed to the Fulton County Deed Recording Office, attesting to the validity of the transfer. And behind all of that, the operating agreement for Cascade Holdings, LLC, listing Derek M. Caldwell as sole member, with a handwritten note in the margin in his handwriting. Transfer complete by December 15th. December 15th. 10 days away. I stood in that vault room and I read every page. I did not rush. I photographed every document with my phone, front and back. In the order they appeared, I noted the notary stamp discrepancy. I noted the attorney's letterhead. I noted the date on the cover letter, which had been prepared 3 weeks earlier. And then I opened the smaller sealed envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, a handwritten note. Not from Derek. Different handwriting entirely. Looping. Left-leaning. With the particular way of writing a capital R that I had seen on birthday cards and sticky notes and text messages for 20 years. Renee's handwriting. The note said,
DSIG came out clean. N confirmed it'll go through before the holiday window. You're clear. Burn this after.
He had not burned it. I read that note 3 times. Then I folded it back into the envelope, placed it exactly where I had found it. And I stood very still in the middle of that fluorescent lit room, and I let the truth land. Not Derek and a stranger. Not Derek and some attorney I had never met. Derek and Renee. 20 years. I had known that woman for 20 years. She had been at my father's funeral. She had sat in the front row of the church and dabbed her eyes when they played his favorite hymn. She had held my hand at the graveside. She had come back to the house afterward and helped my mother wash dishes. She had told stories about Daddy that made us all laugh through our tears. And she had already signed the documents that would steal his house before his body was in the ground. The truth did not just hurt. It gutted me. Like someone reached inside my chest and pulled out everything I thought was real and held it up under that fluorescent light so I could see exactly what it was made of. I do not know how long I stood there. Long enough that Deborah knocked gently on the vault room door. She asked if I needed anything. No, I said. I'm finished. I slid the box closed. I walked out of the vault room. I walked through the lobby. I pushed through the glass door onto Peachtree Street. I stood on the sidewalk in the cold December air, and I did not cry. I wanted to. Every part of me wanted to. But something else was happening underneath the grief. Something that had been building for weeks without my permission. I was angry. Not the hot, disorganized kind of angry that makes you do foolish things. The cold, clarifying kind. The kind that does not shake. The kind that starts making lists. I sat in my car for 10 minutes. I looked at the photographs on my phone. Every page of every document. Time-stamped. Backed up to 2 separate cloud accounts before I had even left the vault room. I looked at Renee's note. I looked at the check with her name on it. And then I noticed something in the bottom of the box that I had almost missed in my shock. A small folded piece of paper, separate from the folder, handwritten. Not Derek's writing. Not Renee's. A name and a phone number I did not recognize. And beneath the number 4 words, Patricia O. Call if it falls apart. I stared at that piece of paper for a long time. Patricia O. was not Derek's contact. The paper was too loose, too separate. Placed like something that had been slipped in rather than filed. Someone else had been in this box. Someone who had left a lifeline. But not for Derek. I folded the paper and put it in my coat pocket. I did not know who Patricia O. was, but the fact that someone had placed her number inside a box full of evidence against my husband told me one thing clearly. She was not on his side. I sat in that car outside First National Bank for a long time. The December sky was the color of old pewter. People walked past on Peachtree Street with their coats pulled close and their heads down against the wind. A delivery truck idled at the corner. Everything moved the way it always moved, ordinary, indifferent. Completely unbothered by the fact that my entire marriage had just been confirmed as a fraud in a fluorescent-lit vault room 4 floors below street level. I looked at the folded piece of paper in my hand. Patricia O. Call if it falls apart. I thought about what that meant. Someone had been in that box. Someone who knew what was inside it. Someone who knew the scheme well enough to know it might fall apart. Someone who had left a number for exactly that contingency. Not Derek's handwriting. Not Renee's. Someone else entirely. I turned the paper over in my fingers. Then I put it in my coat pocket. I started the car and drove. Not home. Not to the office. I drove to Cascade Road and then past it. All the way down to the park at the end of the neighborhood. There was a small gravel lot overlooking a creek that most people did not know about. My father had taken me there when I was a little girl. We used to sit on the concrete barrier at the edge and watch the water. He would tell me that still water and moving water were both water. It was just a question of what the moment called for. I sat in that parking lot and I thought about what this moment called for. The grief was real. I want to say that plainly. Underneath all the analysis and the documentation and the cold professional clarity, there was a woman who had loved a man for 11 years. A woman who had just confirmed that he had been planning to rob her while she buried her father. That pain was real. It was deep. It deserved to be acknowledged. I gave it approximately 10 minutes. I let it sit in the car with me and be what it was. Then I put it in a drawer in my mind. The one I use for things I will deal with fully when the work is done. And I got very quiet inside. Not sad quiet, not scared quiet. The kind of quiet I get right before I walk into a deposition. The moment when I already know every answer before they open their mouths. Something inside me had shifted, completely and permanently. I was not a woman who had found a key anymore. I was a forensic accountant who had identified a fraud, documented the evidence, and was now moving to the next phase of the process. The fact that the subject of the investigation was my husband and my best friend of 20 years was information I noted and set aside. I took out the piece of paper with Patricia O's number. I held it for another minute. Then I dialed. It rang twice.
Patricia Okafor.
The voice was even, professional, unhurried. The voice of a woman who answered her phone the same way whether she was expecting the call or not. "My name is Simone Caldwell," I said. "I found your number in a safe deposit box on Peachtree Street. I think you know why I'm calling." A pause. Not the pause of surprise. The pause of someone choosing their words with precision.
Simone Caldwell.
She said. Something in the way she said my name, not the tone, but the weight of it, like she had said it before in a different context, made the hair on my arms stand up.
I was wondering when you'd call.
"You know who I am," I said. It was not a question.
I know enough. Are you somewhere private?
Yes.
Good. Then let me tell you who I am. I'm a family law and estate fraud attorney. I've been practicing in Atlanta for 16 years. I have a particular focus on cases involving fraudulent property transfers in marital and post-marital contexts. Another pause. And I have a personal stake in seeing Derek Caldwell held accountable. I'll explain what that means when we meet in person. But I want you to know it up front. Because I don't work with clients under false pretenses.
I looked at the creek through the windshield. The water was moving fast after the recent rain. Brown. Purposeful. "When can you meet?" I said. We met the following morning at her office in a building off Peachtree Battle Avenue, 7th floor, corner suite. A view of the treetops. A waiting room quiet enough to hear the clock on the wall. Patricia Okafor was 51 years old, medium height, natural hair cut close. Wearing a charcoal blazer and reading glasses she took off when I walked in. She set them on the desk with the deliberateness of someone who wanted you to know they were paying full attention. She looked at me for a moment before she said anything.
You've already pulled the documents.
Photographed everything in the box, I said. Backed up to 2 cloud accounts. And I have a colleague's preliminary assessment confirming the signature is a forgery. Something moved in her expression. Not quite a smile. Closer to recognition.
Sit down, she said. We have a lot to cover.
She walked me through the legal landscape in language that was precise, but never condescending. The fraudulent deed transfer was the centerpiece, a felony under Georgia law, criminal forgery in the first degree, potentially compounded by the use of a fraudulent notarization. The shell company created to receive the transfer added a layer of criminal intent that strengthened the case significantly. The check made out to Renee constituted evidence of conspiracy, and the timeline the box opened 14 months ago, the forgery prepared and submitted while I was in an active period of bereavement, would matter to a jury.
We need to move before December 15th. That's when the transfer is scheduled to finalize. Once it records unwinding, it becomes significantly more complicated, though not impossible.
What do we file?
Emergency motion to void the transfer and freeze the property pending investigation. I can have it drafted and submitted by end of week.
She folded her hands on the desk.
But there's something else. Before we file, I need you to do something that's going to be very difficult.
Tell me.
Go home. Be normal. Don't change anything. Don't confront him. Don't pull money from joint accounts. Don't change passwords. Don't do anything that signals you know what's happening. She looked at me steadily. Can you do that?
I thought about sitting across the dinner table from Derek last Thursday, smiling while he asked about the estate attorney. I thought about sitting across from Renee at brunch on Saturday, letting her squeeze my hand. I've been doing it for 2 weeks already, I said. Patricia looked at me for a moment, then she nodded slowly.
Good. Then you're further ahead than most people are when they get to my office.
She stood and extended her hand. I shook it.
I promise you, Simone, he is not going to walk away from this.
The certainty in her voice was not reassurance. It was something more specific than that. Something that sounded like it came from experience rather than professional confidence. I noted it. I filed it. I did not ask yet. On my way out, I passed the reception desk. Her assistant was on the phone. I glanced at the framed credentials on the wall beside the door. Law degree from Howard, bar admission, professional associations, and at the bottom, a small framed photograph. Patricia, younger, at what looked like a law school graduation, standing next to an older woman who shared her cheekbones, and on the frame's small placard below the photo, Patricia Harmon Okafor J.D. Harmon, her name before she remarried. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. I stood very still while the doors closed. Aunt Gloria called me that evening, the way she did every few days since Daddy passed. We talked for a while about nothing important. Then she said in that quiet way of hers, "Baby, you sound different tonight. You sound like yourself again." I looked out the kitchen window at the dark backyard. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I think I am." Patricia filed the emergency motion on a Thursday morning. I know because I was sitting in my car in the parking deck behind my office building when she called to confirm it had been submitted. I remember the exact moment, 8:47 in the morning. The parking deck smelling of exhaust and cold concrete, a thin line of winter light cutting across the dashboard. She told me the motion had been received by the clerk's office. She said we had a hearing date set for the following week. The property freeze would be in effect within 48 hours pending the judge's review of the emergency filing.
He won't know about the hearing until he's served. That gives us several days.
Several days during which Derek Montel Caldwell would wake up every morning believing he was 4 days, then 3 days, then 2 days away from completing the transfer of my father's house into his shell company. Several days during which he would sit across from me at the dinner table and smile. Several days during which he would have no idea that the ground under his feet had already been pulled away. I want to be honest about what those days felt like. They were the strangest days of my life, calmer than they had any right to be. I moved through them with a clarity I had never experienced before, not the brittle, fragile clarity of someone holding themselves together. Something deeper, something steadier. The clarity of a woman who had already made her decision and was simply waiting for the right moment to execute it. I went to work. I reviewed client files. I answered emails. I cooked dinner on Thursday the way I always did. I laughed at appropriate moments. I asked Derek about his day with exactly the right amount of interest. From the outside, I was completely and entirely myself. Inside, I was very still. And I was watching everything. Derek was in a good mood that week, an expansive, self-congratulatory good mood. The mood of a man who believed he was about to close the biggest deal of his life. He was generous with compliments, easy with laughter, attentive in small ways he had not been in months. He brought home flowers on Wednesday, nothing extravagant, a grocery store bunch of yellow tulips. He set them on the kitchen counter with a smile that once upon a time would have made me feel loved.
Just because he said,
"Thank you," I said. I put them in a vase. They were still on the counter on the morning everything collapsed. On Friday evening, we had dinner with 2 other couples, friends of ours from the neighborhood, people we had known for years. Over dessert, Derek told a story about a difficult client negotiation that had him coming out on top. The table laughed. At one point, he gestured toward me.
"My wife is the real strategist in this family. I just close the deals."
Everyone smiled. I smiled. But later when we were driving home and I was looking out the passenger window at the nighttime streets of southwest Atlanta, Derek said something that I have thought about many times since.
"You know what? I've always admired about you, Simone.
He was relaxed, one hand on the wheel.
You're the smartest person I know. Genuinely. But you trust people. You give people the benefit of the doubt."
He shook his head slightly.
"That's a gift. Not everybody has that."
I turned to look at him. He was watching the road, still half smiling. "Thank you," I said quietly. What I did not say, that he had just described with perfect accuracy the quality in me that he had spent 14 months exploiting. That the thing he called a gift was the specific vulnerability he had built his entire scheme around. That I was done giving him the benefit of anything. I looked back out the window. I let him have that moment. I let him sit in the warmth of his own cleverness for a few more miles. Saturday morning, Derek was in his home office with the door closed for most of the day. I could hear him on the phone periodically. the low, deliberate voice he used for business calls. At one point, I walked past the door on my way to the kitchen and I caught a fragment.
Should be clean by the 15th, Gerald. We're right on schedule.
Gerald, the Dunwoody attorney. Right on schedule. I went to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea. I stood at the window looking out at the backyard. The winter garden was bare and brown. The bird feeder my father had given us as a housewarming gift was empty. I made a mental note to fill it. Then Derek came into the kitchen, freshly off his call, leaning against the counter with that expansive energy he had been carrying all week.
Hey, he said, I've been thinking. After the holidays, we should take a trip. Somewhere warm. We haven't done that in a while.
I looked at him. This man who had created a shell company to steal my father's house. This man who had forged my signature while I was sitting at a deathbed. This man who was now suggesting a vacation with the money he planned to make from selling a property that was never his. That sounds nice, I said. Where were you thinking?
Maybe Turks and Caicos. Or Aruba.
He picked up an apple from the bowl on the counter. He took a bite.
Somewhere you can just relax and not think about work for a week.
I'd like that, I said. I smiled at him across the kitchen. He smiled back. And in that moment, in that perfectly ordinary Saturday morning kitchen moment, I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not triumph, not satisfaction, something quieter, something more final than either of those things. The feeling of a door closing on a room you will never enter again. That evening, I texted Patricia a single word. Ready. She responded within 2 minutes.
Monday, 9 in the morning. Courtroom 7C. It's time.
I put my phone face down on the nightstand, the same way Derek had been putting his phone down for months. I turned off the lamp. I lay in the dark and listened to my husband breathing beside me. He slept easily. He always had. The deep, untroubled sleep of a man with a clear conscience. Or at least a man who had decided his conscience was not something he needed to consult. Sunday passed quietly. Sunday brunch. Just the two of us that week, sitting on the back porch in the thin December sun because Derek said he wanted some air. We drank coffee. We talked about nothing important. At one point, he reached over and covered my hand with his.
We're good, right? You and me.
I looked at our hands on the armrest of the porch chair, his large and warm hand over mine. We're good, I said. Monday morning, I was up before 5. I showered and dressed carefully. Charcoal gray suit. Pearl earrings. The ones from my grandmother that I had worn at our wedding. I made coffee. I fed the birds. Derek was still asleep when I picked up my bag and my coat and walked to the front door. I paused in the hallway, the same hallway where I had found the key 6 weeks ago. I looked at the hook where his jacket had hung that night. Then I opened the door. I walked out into the cold morning air. He had no idea what was coming. He slept right through the beginning of his own ending. Courtroom 7C was on the 4th floor of the Fulton County Courthouse on Pryor Street. I had been in courtrooms before as an expert witness, as a consultant, as the person who hands the attorney the document that changes the direction of the entire proceeding. I knew how they smelled. Old wood and recycled air and the particular tension of a room where things get decided. I knew how to sit in them without letting the room affect my breathing. I got there at 8:45. Patricia was already at the plaintiff's table, her files open, her reading glasses on, a cup of coffee cooling at her elbow. She looked up when I walked in and gave me a single nod. Nothing more was needed. Derek arrived at 8:58 with his attorney, a man named Fowler, silver-haired and expensive-looking, the kind of attorney you hired when you were confident you were going to win. Derek was wearing his best suit, the dark navy one he wore to closings. He walked in the way he always walked into rooms, like he belonged there, like the room had been waiting for him. He saw me at the plaintiff's table and his steps slowed for just a fraction of a second. Then he recovered and kept walking. He sat down across the room and leaned over to say something to Fowler. Fowler nodded. Derek glanced at Patricia with the brief dismissive assessment of a man who had already decided the other side was outmatched. He did not know who Patricia was yet. The judge entered at 9 on the dot. The Honorable Catherine Reeves, 60 years old, natural silver locks, reading glasses on a plain cord, the expression of a woman who had seen every variety of human dishonesty and was not impressed by any of it. The room stood. The room sat. The proceedings began. Fowler went first. He was smooth and well prepared, I will give him that. He argued that the transfer documents were valid, that the signature had been properly witnessed and notarized, that the property transfer to Cascade Holdings, LLC, was a legitimate marital asset management decision made jointly by both spouses. He used the word jointly 3 times. He cited 2 precedents. He was confident in the way that men are confident when they believe the documentation supports them, and the other side has nothing. Derek sat beside him with his arms loosely folded and a slight smile on his face. The smile of a man watching a foregone conclusion unfold in his favor. When Fowler finished, Judge Reeves looked at Patricia.
Counselor.
Patricia stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform. She simply began laying the evidence on the table the way you lay cards one at a time, face up with complete calm. The forensic analysis of the forged signature prepared by Marcus Webb, certified forensic document examiner with 17 years of federal case experience. The time-stamped photographs from the deed recording office. The registration documents for Cascade Holdings, LLC. The safe deposit box rental charge appearing in the joint account 14 months ago. The fraudulent notarization cross-referenced against the Georgia Notary Public Database. The registration number on the stamp did not exist. And then the check. Made out to Renee D. Washington. $22,000. Memo line consulting services rendered. Fowler was on his feet. Your Honor, this is...
Sit down, Counselor.
Judge Reeves said without looking up from the documents Patricia had submitted. Fowler sat. Derek's smile had not moved. He was still wearing it, but it had gone rigid the way a smile goes when the face beneath it is doing something different. He leaned over to Fowler and said something quietly. Fowler responded without looking at him. Patricia continued. She presented Renee's handwritten note photographed from inside the safe deposit box, the original preserved in an evidence envelope. She read it aloud into the record slowly and clearly.
D-Sig came out clean and confirmed it'll go through before the holiday window. You're clear. Burn this after.
Then she presented the affidavit from Renee Washington herself. The room was very quiet. Renee had contacted Patricia's office 4 days earlier. Faced with the evidence and the prospect of felony conspiracy charges, she had agreed to provide a full sworn statement in exchange for cooperation consideration from the district attorney's office. The affidavit detailed the entire arrangement. How Derek had approached her 14 months ago. How he had provided her with samples of my signature to practice from. How she had perfected the forgery over the course of 6 weeks. How she had signed as witness on the fraudulent documents. And how Derek had promised her $22,000 upon successful completion of the transfer. Derek's hand resting on the table in front of him went very still. Patricia set down the last document and looked across the room.
Your Honor, the plaintiff requests that the court void the fraudulent transfer, freeze all assets associated with Cascade Holdings, LLC, and refer this matter to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation of forgery in the first-degree fraudulent real estate transfer and conspiracy.
Judge Reeves looked at Derek over her reading glasses.
Mr. Caldwell,
She said,
would you like to respond?
and this is the moment I have gone over in my mind more times than I can count. Because what happened in Derek's face in the 3 seconds between that question and his attempt to answer it, I want you to understand that I have spent 12 years reading people, and I have never seen anything like it. The color left him. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had pulled a plug somewhere. His face went from the warm, confident brown I had looked at across a dinner table for 11 years to something gray and slack, and suddenly terribly unfamiliar. His hand, the still one on the table, began to tremble. Not a small tremor. A visible, uncontrolled shake that traveled up his forearm. He reached for the glass of water in front of him, and his grip was so unsteady that Fowler put a hand on his arm. His mouth opened.
That's...
His voice came out wrong. Crack down the middle that voice that had told me I was projecting, that had asked me if we were good, that had said trust me in 100 different ways over 11 years. It cracked like something that had been hollow all along.
That's not. Those documents are...
He stopped. He could not finish the sentence, because Patricia was not finished. She turned to face him directly, and her voice was perfectly even, and she said,
Mr. Caldwell, my name is Patricia Okafor, but my name before I remarried was Patricia Harmon.
A pause, precise and deliberate.
You may remember me as the woman you did this exact same thing to in 2014. The woman whose signature you forged on a property transfer in DeKalb County. The case that was settled privately before it reached a courtroom.
Another pause.
This one will not be settled privately.
The sound Derek made was not a word. It was not anything that could be transcribed. His knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table with both hands. Sweat had broken out across his forehead. His mouth worked soundlessly like a man who had rehearsed for every scenario except the true one. Fowler was already gathering his papers. Judge Reeves watched Derek for a moment with the expression of a woman who had seen this particular kind of collapse before and felt no obligation to rush it along. Then she looked at her clerk and said,
Let the record reflect the plaintiff's motion is granted in full. The transfer is voided. Cascade Holdings, LLC assets are frozen pending criminal referral. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Caldwell has a moment to compose himself before we continue.
In the hallway afterward, Derek found me. I do not know how he got past Patricia and the bailiff, but he did. He came toward me in the corridor outside courtroom 7C with his tie loosened and his face still that terrible gray color. He reached for my arm.
Simone.
His voice was raw, unrecognizable.
Simone, please. I can explain all of it. Every piece of it. I was going to tell you. I was in debt. I was so far in, I didn't know how to tell you. And I panicked and I made the worst decision of my life, and I know that. But please, we can fix this. I love you. I have always loved you. Please.
I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked at his face. Once that face had made me feel like the luckiest woman in Atlanta. I removed his hand from my arm gently and completely. You don't love me, Derek, I said. You loved what you thought you could take from me. There is a difference. And you have known that difference your whole life. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I picked up my bag. I straightened my grandmother's pearl earrings, and I walked down that courthouse corridor without looking back. Behind me, I heard Fowler telling his client quietly with the flat professionalism of a man who wanted to be done with this, that he would be receiving a criminal summons within 72 hours and that he should begin thinking about whether he wanted to retain separate counsel. 3 months later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I did not recognize. 4 words and a period. He pled guilty, 18 months. I read it once. I set the phone down on my kitchen counter next to the vase, a new one in the new house with fresh flowers I had bought for myself that morning, and I went back to watering my plants. The house in Decatur is smaller than the one on Cascade Road. That was a deliberate choice. I did not want more space. I wanted the right space. A craftsman bungalow on a quiet street lined with oak trees. 3 bedrooms. A deep front porch. A backyard with enough room for a garden I have been slowly learning to tend. The kitchen faces east, which means the morning light comes in clean and gold across the countertops every day around 7. In the months since I moved in, I have come to understand that this is not a small thing. The quality of your morning light matters more than most people realize, until they find themselves in a place where it is good. I bought it in February, 2 months after the hearing. Cash purchase. No joint financing. Nothing that required another name beside mine on any document. The closing attorney, a woman Patricia recommended, looked at the paperwork. Then she looked at me. Everything is clean. This is entirely yours. I had to take a breath before I could respond. Entirely yours. 2 words I had not fully understood the weight of until that moment. I kept the Collier Heights house too. I am not selling it. I repainted the kitchen the color my father always talked about wanting. A warm terracotta that catches the afternoon light in a way that makes the room feel like it is breathing. I go there on Sunday afternoons sometimes. I sit on the back porch. I drink coffee. I listened to the neighborhood the way Daddy used to. And I talked to him the way you talk to people who are no longer in the room but have never fully left it either. I told him I understood now why he said what he said. I told him his house was safe. I told him I was okay. I believe he heard me, just like before. Patricia and I had dinner for the first time as something other than attorney and client about 6 weeks after the hearing, at a West African restaurant in Decatur she had been going to for years. We sat across from each other over jollof rice and fried plantains. She told me the full story of what Derek had done to her in 2014, the property in DeKalb County, the forged documents, the private settlement she had agreed to because she was newly divorced and exhausted. Her attorney at the time had advised her that a public case would cost more than she would recover. She had regretted that decision for 9 years.
When I found out he had remarried, she said, I kept track. Not obsessively, but I kept track. I knew the kind of man he was. I knew it was a matter of time.
She looked at her glass.
I placed my number in that box during a routine review I was hired to conduct on an unrelated matter at that branch. I had no idea whose box it was. But when the branch manager mentioned the co-holder's name, Simone Caldwell, forensic accountant, I thought if this woman is what I think she is, she will find it.
I looked at her across the table. You gambled on a stranger.
I gambled on a woman who catches liars for a living. That is not the same thing.
We laughed. It was the first time I had laughed fully from somewhere real in months. It felt like something coming back online. We have dinner at least once a month now. We are building the kind of friendship that gets made between women who have walked through the same fire from different directions and come out the other side knowing exactly what matters. Those friendships are rare. I do not take it lightly. Renee and I have not spoken since the hearing. I want to be honest about how I feel about that, because I think the honest answer is more complicated than people expect. I do not spend my days consumed by anger toward her. The anger was real. It was justified, and I felt every ounce of it. But at some point, I cannot name the exact day I realized that carrying it was a weight I was choosing to pick up every morning, and I made a different choice. I let it go. Not for her, not to excuse what she did, not to minimize what it cost me. For me, because I have seen what people look like when they spend years tending their bitterness like a garden, and I have decided that is not what I want to grow. What she did was a betrayal of a magnitude I do not have adequate language for. She will live with that. That is hers to carry, not mine. Aunt Gloria came to see the new house in March, on a Saturday when the cherry trees on my street were just beginning to bloom. She walked through every room with her reading glasses on, her hands clasped behind her back, the way she does when she is making a serious assessment. She stood in the kitchen for a long time looking at the morning light. Then she turned around and looked at me. Your daddy would have liked this house, she said. I nodded. I could not speak for a moment. And for what it's worth, she said in that perfectly dry way of hers. I told you. I laughed. She laughed. I hugged her longer than I usually do, and she let me, which is its own kind of language from Gloria. Yes, ma'am, I said into her shoulder. You told me. Derek pled guilty in March to forgery in the first degree and fraudulent real estate transfer. 18 months. With the possibility of early release contingent on restitution. His real estate license was permanently revoked by the Georgia Real Estate Commission the week after the criminal referral was filed. The last I heard, he was serving his sentence at a correctional facility outside of Macon. I do not think about him often. When I do, it is not with the anger I expected to feel. And it is not with the grief I expected to feel either. It is with something quieter and more final. The feeling you have when you close a book that turned out to be nothing like what the cover promised. You set it down, and you pick up something else. I went back to work in January. Caldwell Forensic Group. Same office. Same 3 employees. Same cases. But something is different now. I notice it every day in small ways. When I sit across from a client and they describe how a fraud was perpetrated against them, how they trusted the wrong person, how the numbers were hidden in plain sight, how they feel foolish for not seeing it sooner, I do not just hear the professional details anymore. I hear the whole person inside the story. The specific ache of being deceived by someone you loved. The particular disorientation of having your own life used against you. I am better at this work than I have ever been. Not because I am smarter, because I am more complete. There is something I want to say to you before I finish. Something I mean sincerely. For anyone listening who is in the middle of their own version of this story, whatever form it takes, whatever name is on the document, whatever room you are standing in with evidence you did not want to find, you are not foolish for having trusted. Trust is not a flaw. It is a form of courage. The people who exploit it are the ones who carry the shame of that. Not you. What they took from you. Your time. Your peace. Your sense of what was real. Those are losses that are real. They deserve to be grieved. But they are not the end of your story. They are a chapter. A painful, formative, clarifying chapter. One that will one day be the thing that made you unbreakable. I know that is hard to believe when you are standing in the middle of it. I know the middle looks nothing like the other side. But I am standing on the other side right now, telling you it exists. I am 38 years old. I live in a house where the morning light comes in clean and gold every day. I have work that matters, friendships that are real, and a garden that is learning slowly to grow. I still have my father's pearl earrings. I wear them on days that require courage. My name is Simone Elaine Caldwell. I am the woman who found the key. And I am the one who opened the box. If this story moved you, if any part of it felt familiar or gave you something to hold on to, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this right now, share it with them. That is why we tell these stories. Subscribe if you haven't already, because there is more coming, and every single story matters. You are not alone in this. Not even close.